The Balkan Peninsula, a crossroads of continents and cultures, is defined by its diverse geography. Its central feature is the Stara Planina, or Balkan Mountains, a formidable chain that stretches from west to east, creating a natural divide in the land. To the south, the Rhodope Mountains form a high, rugged barrier, while to the north, the fertile plains along the Danube River offered a rich agricultural base. This varied topography dictated the movement of peoples, the location of settlements, and the strategic importance of future kingdoms. Before the Bulgars arrived, this landscape was home to numerous peoples whose histories are woven into the very fabric of the land. The earliest prominent inhabitants were the Thracians, a people known for their sophisticated culture and distinctive burial mounds, or tumuli. They were skilled craftsmen, particularly in metallurgy, and their legacy is most notably preserved in the stunning gold and silver work discovered in their royal tombs. They were not a single unified nation, but a collection of tribes, and their independent existence gradually faded as they were absorbed by the expanding Roman Empire. By the early medieval period, the Thracian identity had largely dissolved, leaving behind only archaeological evidence and a cultural footprint. The demographic map of the Balkans was fundamentally redrawn by the Slavic migration. Beginning in the late 5th century and intensifying throughout the 6th century, waves of Slavic peoples moved south from their original homelands, north of the Carpathian Mountains. They came not as a single centralized army, but as a series of decentralized tribal groups. These tribes were predominantly agriculturalists and settled in villages throughout the river valleys and plains. Their presence in the region was widespread and permanent. The Byzantine Empire, ruling from Constantinople, viewed this massive influx with alarm. Emperor Justinian I, for example, undertook extensive fortification efforts to protect his northern provinces from the Slavic incursions, but the sheer number of settlers made it impossible to dislodge them. Just a quick announcement: if you enjoy this video so far, please subscribe to our channel, as it motivates us to bring you a new story every evening. This is the only kind request tonight, and we won't bother you with it anymore until the very end of today's story. Let's get back to the video. Over the course of the 6th and 7th centuries, Byzantine control over much of the Balkan hinterland became nominal at best. The Slavs were often hostile to Byzantine rule and established their own tribal territories, which the Byzantines referred to as Sclaviniae. While sharing a common language family and similar cultural traits, these tribes remained politically fragmented. They had no single ruler and no common state. By the end of the 7th century, the Balkan Peninsula was a political patchwork of autonomous Slavic tribes, existing in a tense and often hostile relationship with the surviving Byzantine territories. This fragmented landscape, ripe for a unifying force, set the perfect stage for the arrival of the Bulgars, who would soon forge a new state from this mosaic of peoples. The origins of the Bulgars are rooted in the nomadic world of Central Asia. They were a Turkic people who, for centuries, had roamed the vast Eurasian steppes, mastering the art of cavalry warfare. Their early political organization coalesced into a tribal confederation known as Old Great Bulgaria, centered in the region north of the Black Sea. This state, led by Khan Kubrat, was a significant political entity that maintained a fragile peace with the Byzantine Empire. Upon Kubrat's death in the mid-7th century, however, the confederation fractured under internal pressure and attacks from the Khazars, a powerful Turkic empire from the east. This fragmentation led to the dispersal of the Bulgar tribes in various directions. One of Kubrat's sons, Aspara, led a contingent of his people on a westward migration. Their journey brought them to the fertile lands on the northern bank of the Danube River, an area historically under Byzantine influence but now populated by decentralized Slavic tribes. This region was strategically vital, providing a natural barrier against potential Byzantine aggression and access to abundant resources. Aspara's Bulgars were a well-disciplined military force, defined by their mastery of the bow and horsemanship. Their military tactics relied on speed, maneuverability, and a deep understanding of steppe warfare, including feigned retreats to lure opponents into ambushes. This martial prowess, forged over generations on the steppes, gave them a significant advantage over the less organized local populations. Their presence on the Danube was not a covert affair. They quickly came into direct confrontation with the Byzantine Empire. Emperor Constantine IV, wary of a new powerful neighbor, launched a major military campaign to expel the Bulgars. The Byzantine forces, including a large fleet, advanced with the intention of cornering the Bulgars at the Danube Delta. Aspara, however, used the terrain to his advantage. He employed guerrilla tactics, harassing the Byzantine army and preventing a decisive engagement. The swampy, difficult territory weakened the Byzantine soldiers, who were not accustomed to such conditions. A strategic and decisive moment came when the Byzantine emperor left his troops for a period of time to seek treatment for a personal ailment. The troops, believing their emperor had abandoned them, panicked and broke ranks. Aspara seized this opportunity, launching a full-scale attack. His swift and coordinated cavalry charge routed the demoralized Byzantine army. This victory was not merely a military triumph, it was a political earthquake. It demonstrated the Bulgars' military superiority and forced the Byzantines to acknowledge their new presence. Following this decisive defeat, the Byzantines were compelled to sign a peace treaty. This treaty not only recognized the existence of the new Bulgar state, but also obligated the Byzantine Empire to pay an annual tribute, a humiliating concession for the once invincible Roman state. Aspara's leadership had successfully transformed a migrating group of tribes into a recognized power on the Byzantine frontier. Following their decisive victory over the Byzantine army, the Bulgars under Khan Aspara faced the next significant challenge: consolidating their power and establishing a stable political entity. Their military success had secured them a permanent foothold in the region, but their position was not without its complexities. They were a relatively small nomadic military elite, now residing in a territory predominantly populated by a settled agricultural people, the Slavs. The forging of a unified state required more than military force. It demanded a political and social compromise. The union between the Bulgars and the Slavic tribes was not born of conquest, but of strategic necessity and mutual benefit. The Bulgar ruling class, while militarily dominant, needed a permanent population to provide a steady supply of food and manpower. Their nomadic lifestyle was not sustainable in the long term for governing a settled territory. The Slavic tribes, for their part, were politically fragmented and vulnerable. They lacked a centralized military command and were constantly exposed to both the incursions of the Bulgars and the subjugation attempts of the Byzantine Empire. The formalization of this alliance, which historians date to 681 amperes d, created a powerful symbiosis. The Bulgars provided a formidable, unified military defense, while the Slavs contributed their labor and agricultural resources. This pragmatic arrangement was the foundation of the First Bulgarian Empire. The new kingdom's administrative structure reflected this dualistic nature. The Bulgar military aristocracy, headed by the Khan, formed the central authority, while the Slavic tribal leaders were integrated into the new state's governance, retaining some autonomy at the local level. The capital was established at Pliska, a strategic location in the northeastern part of the territory, serving as the seat of the Khan's power and the central point for military command. This fortified settlement was the administrative heart of the new state, from which a new legal and political order could be established. Despite the initial treaty with Byzantium, the new state's existence was not secure. The Byzantine emperors considered the loss of their former territory a grave humiliation and viewed the burgeoning Bulgarian Empire as an existential threat. Military confrontations were frequent, as the Byzantines launched repeated campaigns to reassert control over the Balkan Peninsula. The early decades of the empire were thus defined by a continuous struggle for survival, forcing the Bulgarians to maintain a high state of military readiness. The most profound challenge was the eventual integration of the two different peoples. The Bulgars had a distinct Turkic language and culture, while the Slavs spoke a different tongue and had their own customs. Over time, due to the sheer numerical superiority of the Slavic population. A process of cultural and linguistic assimilation began. The Bulgars, while providing the state's name and its ruling structure, began to adopt the language and traditions of the Slavs, a process that would culminate in the formation of a new, unified Bulgarian identity. The reign of Khan Tervel, succeeding Aspara, marked a critical phase in the nascent Bulgarian Empire's history, characterized by its first major intervention on the European political stage. While his predecessors focused on securing the borders and consolidating the state, Tervel's legacy is inextricably linked to the defense of Constantinople against a massive coordinated Arab siege. This event, occurring in 717 and 718 amperes D, was one of the most significant military engagements of the early medieval period. The Umayyad Caliphate, at the height of its power, launched a land and sea campaign with the express purpose of capturing the Byzantine capital. Their forces, led by Maslama ibn Abd al-Malik, were immense, comprising a vast army and a powerful fleet. The city of Constantinople was besieged from both land and sea, its famous triple walls and the Byzantine navy standing as the primary defences. However, the Byzantines, under Emperor Leo III, recognized that their survival depended on securing external support to break the siege. Emperor Leo III turned to Khan Tervel, his neighbour and a leader of a state that had previously been a rival. Tervel's involvement was not a simple act of altruism. The fall of Constantinople would have left the Bulgarian Empire as the next target for the expanding caliphate. The strategic imperative was clear. A strong Byzantine Empire, even if an adversary, was a necessary buffer against a potentially far more dangerous foe. A treaty was swiftly negotiated, outlining terms of alliance and cooperation. In the summer of 718 amperes D, as the siege entered its second year, the Bulgarian forces intervened. Tervel's army, composed of disciplined cavalry, attacked the rear of the Arab army from the Thracian plains. The assault was devastatingly effective. The Arabs, caught between the impregnable city walls and the unexpected Bulgarian force, were routed. The military engagement was so one-sided that contemporary Byzantine chroniclers described the field as being covered with tens of thousands of Arab casualties. The Bulgarian intervention effectively broke the land siege. The Arab fleet, simultaneously harassed by Byzantine Greek fire, was forced to retreat. The successful defense of Constantinople had profound geopolitical consequences. It halted the eastward expansion of the Umayyad Caliphate into Europe, securing the Byzantine Empire and creating a new balance of power in the region. In recognition of his crucial role, the Byzantines bestowed upon Tervel the title of Caesar, a high imperial honor that had never before been granted to a foreign ruler. This acknowledgement solidified Bulgaria's status as a legitimate and powerful entity in the eyes of the European powers, and confirmed the strategic importance of the Bulgarian state as a force to be reckoned with. Following the death of Khan Tervel, the Bulgarian state entered a period of profound internal instability that would last for several decades. The firm leadership that had defined the reigns of Aspara and Tervel was replaced by a series of weak and short-lived rulers, often gaining power through violence and intrigue. The system of succession was not yet formalized, leading to frequent and bloody conflicts among the aristocracy, known as the boyars. These internal struggles severely weakened the central authority and diverted the state's resources from external defense to maintaining domestic control. The political landscape was a volatile succession of assassinations and coups, with some khans ruling for only a few months before being overthrown. This period of political turmoil provided a significant opportunity for the Byzantine Empire. Emperors in Constantinople, still smarting from their defeats and the humiliating tribute payments, saw a chance to reclaim lost territories and neutralize the Bulgarian threat. They launched a series of military campaigns, probing the Bulgarian defenses and seeking to exploit the disunity. The Byzantines aimed to destabilize the region, supporting different factions and claimants to the Bulgarian throne to ensure that no single powerful ruler could emerge. This strategy of fostering internal strife proved to be a powerful weapon. Military engagements during this time were frequent, but rarely resulted in decisive victories for either side. The Bulgarian state, despite its internal fragmentation, could still mount a defense. Campaigns were often localized to border regions, involving raids and skirmishes rather than major pitched battles. These conflicts drained both empires of resources and manpower, creating a constant state of low-intensity warfare. The lack of a strong, unified Bulgarian command, however, meant that the Bulgars were often on the defensive, reacting to Byzantine incursions rather than dictating the terms of engagement. This continuous pressure from Byzantium and the internal power struggles prevented the empire from expanding and consolidating its territory. The Slavic tribes within the empire, who had initially sought Bulgar protection, faced uncertainty. The weak central government was often unable to provide the military security they had been promised, leading to a degree of localized autonomy and a weakening of the initial union. The political fragility of this era underscored the necessity of a strong central leader to unite the disparate elements of the state and provide a clear direction for its foreign policy. The period demonstrated that while a military force had established the kingdom, its survival depended on the establishment of a durable and stable political system. The Bulgarian state was not yet a unified empire in a political sense, but a fragile confederation held together by the memory of past victories and the immediate need for defense against a powerful neighbor. The reign of Khan Omurtag ushered in a new era of cultural and political stability for the Bulgarian Empire, following the turbulent decades of internal strife. Ascending to power, Omurtag immediately set about consolidating the central authority and restoring order among the boyars. He ended the destructive succession crises that had plagued the state, ensuring a more stable political environment. This internal pacification allowed him to focus on external relations and monumental projects that would define his legacy. His diplomacy with the Byzantine Empire, and later with the Frankish Empire under Louis the Pious, led to a period of relative peace on the state's borders, securing the gains made by his predecessors and providing the necessary conditions for internal development. This newfound stability was most visibly expressed in a large-scale building program. Omurtag initiated the construction of new palaces and administrative complexes, not merely as living quarters, but as symbols of centralized power and imperial permanence. He undertook extensive reconstruction and expansion of the capital at Pliska, which had suffered from the previous conflicts. The new buildings were designed to be both functional and imposing, featuring stone foundations and columns that replaced earlier wooden structures. These architectural achievements projected an image of a confident, enduring state, demonstrating that the empire was no longer a temporary alliance of tribes, but a formidable political entity. In a move to further solidify his rule and create a unified state, Omurtag oversaw the development of a comprehensive legal code. This was a critical step in moving from a tribal federation to a more cohesive empire. The code standardized laws regarding property, civil disputes, and criminal offenses, applying a single set of rules across both the Bulgar military aristocracy and the numerous Slavic populations. It was designed to replace customary laws with a formalized legal system, thereby strengthening the authority of the Khan and his appointed officials throughout the empire's territory. This legal framework was instrumental in the administrative and social integration of the diverse populations, providing a common basis for justice and order. The combination of political stability, architectural expansion, and legal reform fostered a period of cultural flourishing. With the cessation of constant warfare and political turmoil, the empire's resources could be directed towards civil projects and the development of a sophisticated administrative class. This created an environment in which art and craftsmanship thrived. The construction of new palaces required skilled artisans and engineers, and the development of a legal system necessitated a literate class of scribes and administrators. This flourishing demonstrated the growing maturity of the Bulgarian state, which was now a regional power capable of not only military defense, but also complex governance and cultural production. Omurtag's reign is therefore remembered as a foundational era that established the political and legal infrastructure upon which the future golden ages of the empire would be built. Khan Krum ascended to the Bulgarian throne following the relative peace of Ometag's reign, marking an abrupt return to aggressive military expansionism and decisive political centralization. His rule is defined by brutal efficiency and calculated moves against the neighboring states, most notably the Byzantine Empire and the remnants of the Avar Khaganate. Krum successfully prosecuted wars against the Avars, effectively dismantling their power structure and integrating the newly acquired lands and Slavic populations along the Middle Danube into the Bulgarian realm. This northwestern expansion significantly increased the geographic size and population base of the empire. However, Krum's most famous and consequential conflict was the direct confrontation with Byzantium. In 811 Amperes, Emperor Nikephoros I launched a massive, determined campaign against Bulgaria, intending to finally destroy the state. The Byzantine army managed to penetrate deep into Bulgarian territory and reached the capital city of Pliska, which they sacked and destroyed. Krum initially sought peace negotiations, but Nikephoros, emboldened by his success, refused to treat, aiming for complete subjugation. This refusal proved to be a catastrophic miscalculation for the Byzantines. Krum meticulously planned a counteroffensive. He mobilized his forces, including Slavic levies, and organized a strategic ambush. The Bulgarian army trapped the Byzantine forces as they attempted to withdraw through the mountainous passes of the Balkan range, specifically at the Battle of Pliska, often referred to as the Battle of the Varbitsa Pass. The resulting engagement was not merely a defeat for Byzantium, but a total annihilation. The entire Byzantine army was routed, and Emperor Nikephoros I himself was killed in the battle. This unprecedented event marked the first time a reigning Byzantine emperor had been killed in combat by a foreign power in over 4 centuries. The aftermath of the victory solidified Krum's terrifying reputation. In a symbolic act of dominance and humiliation, the Khan ordered the skull of Emperor Nikephoros I to be cleaned, lined with silver, and used as a ceremonial drinking cup, a practice rooted in steppe tradition. This powerful gesture sent shockwaves throughout the Byzantine world, serving as a visceral demonstration of Bulgarian military superiority and Krum's uncompromising resolve. Beyond his military prowess, Krum was also an effective legislator, demonstrating a commitment to administrative unity. He promulgated new legal statutes aimed at fostering a homogeneous legal environment for all subjects, regardless of ethnic background. These laws were notably severe, designed to curb crime, regulate social life, and enforce a strict sense of order and loyalty to the central authority. His legal reforms, combined with his military triumphs, ensured that Krum's reign was a pivotal era that consolidated Bulgarian power, cemented its borders, and established the framework for a dominant state in southeastern Europe. The decision by Prince Boris I to adopt Christianity was a pivotal moment for the First Bulgarian Empire, driven not solely by religious conviction, but by calculated political necessity. By the mid-9th century, Bulgaria existed as a polytheistic state surrounded by Christian powers, primarily the Byzantine Empire to the south and the Frankish Empire to the west. This religious difference provided a pretext for continued hostility and denied Bulgaria the diplomatic and legal recognition afforded to Christian nations. The adoption of a monotheistic state religion was seen as a crucial step towards elevating Bulgaria's status on the European stage and integrating it into the broader Christian political order. Another key motivation was the need for internal unification. Despite the legal reforms of Khan Krum, a fundamental division persisted between the Turkic Bulgar ruling elite and the vast majority of the Slavic population. The Bulgars had their own religious traditions, while the Slavs still adhered to their ancient beliefs. This religious divide threatened the long-term cohesion of the empire. Adopting a single, shared religion offered a powerful tool to bridge this cultural gap, creating a common identity and a shared moral and legal framework for all subjects under the authority of the prince. A unified church could act as a centralized institution that reinforced the state's power across its diverse territories. The process of conversion was a complex diplomatic balancing act between two powerful rivals: the Roman Catholic Church under Pope Nicholas I in Rome, and the Eastern Orthodox Church under Patriarch Photius in Constantinople. Boris I did not want to place his newly Christianized state under the sole religious authority of the Byzantine Empire, which he correctly perceived as a political trap. A Byzantine-dominated church could be used to assert political control over Bulgaria. To maintain his autonomy, Boris shrewdly played Rome and Constantinople against each other. Initial negotiations were opened with the papacy, with Boris expressing a willingness to accept Christianity from Rome. This move created pressure on the Byzantines. Fearing the loss of a key sphere of influence and the establishment of a Roman foothold on their doorstep, the Byzantine Emperor Michael III launched a military campaign against Bulgaria. In 864 AD, facing this formidable force and an internal rebellion by the anti-Christian Bulgar aristocracy, Boris capitulated. He agreed to accept Christianity from Constantinople and to place the Bulgarian Church under the authority of the Patriarchate. This strategic concession secured a peace treaty and allowed Boris to suppress the internal opposition with Byzantine military aid. However, the diplomatic maneuvering did not end there. Disappointed with Constantinople's refusal to grant the Bulgarian Church full autonomy and appoint a Bulgarian patriarch, Boris once again turned to Rome. He sent a delegation with numerous questions about church canon and practice, hinting at a potential switch in allegiance. The papacy responded with the Responsio Nicolae Papae ad Consulta Bulgarorum, a comprehensive set of answers that included a more favourable stance on the autonomy of a Bulgarian archbishop. This move infuriated Byzantium and demonstrated Boris's diplomatic dexterity. Though a permanent split with Constantinople was averted in the end, the long diplomatic dance secured for Bulgaria a degree of ecclesiastical independence that would be a foundational element of its national identity and political power for centuries to come. The Christianization of Bulgaria under Boris I created an immediate and profound need for a liturgical and literary language comprehensible to the Slavic-speaking majority. While the new state religion was Orthodox, its canonical texts and services were in Greek, a language inaccessible to the common populace. This linguistic barrier presented a significant challenge to the effective evangelization and consolidation of the faith, threatening to make the new religion merely a superficial overlay on the existing culture. The solution arrived not through internal means, but from a diplomatic and scholarly migration. In the 862s, the Byzantine scholars Saints Cyril and Methodius had developed a unique script, Glagolitic, to translate religious texts for the Great Moravian state, a Slavic principality in Central Europe. This was done to counter the influence of the Frankish clergy, who used Latin. However, after the death of Methodius, his disciples faced persecution and expulsion from Moravia by the Latin clergy. This forced them to seek refuge, and Prince Boris I of Bulgaria, acutely aware of his empire's needs, offered them sanctuary. He welcomed a group of the most prominent disciples, including Clement, Naum, and Angelarius. This decision was a masterstroke of statecraft. Boris I did not merely provide asylum, he granted these scholars the resources and patronage required to continue their work. The Bulgarian court, in a deliberate effort to establish its own ecclesiastical independence, embraced their mission. Under this new patronage, the disciples, based at the Bulgarian capital, adapted their work. They refined the Glagolitic script into a new alphabet that was simpler and more accessible. This new script, now known as Cyrillic, was based on the Greek uncial alphabet, but included distinct letters for sounds unique to the Slavic language. It was a logical and practical innovation designed for rapid transcription and widespread use. Once created, the Cyrillic alphabet was swiftly and systematically adopted across the First Bulgarian Empire. Literary schools were established in key locations, with two major centers emerging at Preslav and Ohrid. These centers became the hubs of a massive translation effort. Biblical texts, theological works, and liturgical books were translated from Greek into what is now known as Old Church Slavonic. This process, often referred to as the Slavicization of the liturgy, allowed the Bulgarian clergy to conduct services and teach the faith in a language their parishioners understood. It made the church an organic and integral part of daily life, fostering a deeper religious commitment. The Cyrillic script was more than just a writing system. It became a foundational element of a distinct Slavic cultural and religious identity. It enabled the creation of a body of literature and scholarship that was not dependent on Greek sources, thus differentiating Bulgarian religious life from direct Byzantine influence. The development and promotion of this script secured for Bulgaria the role of a spiritual and cultural leader for the entire Slavic world. The alphabet and the Old Church Slavonic literary tradition it enabled would eventually spread from Bulgaria to Serbia and Kievan Rus', making it a lasting legacy of the Bulgarian state's calculated pursuit of political and religious autonomy. Tsar Simeon I's ascension to the Bulgarian throne in 893 AD ushered in a period widely considered the zenith of the First Bulgarian Empire's power and cultural influence. Educated in Constantinople, Simeon possessed a rare blend of Byzantine scholarship and Bulgarian martial ambition. His reign was defined by relentless military campaigns and a strategic vision that aimed to establish Bulgaria as a dominant imperial force, rivaling the Byzantine Empire itself. He frequently engaged in a series of conflicts with Byzantium, most notably the Byzantine-Bulgarian War of 894–896, triggered by a Byzantine trade policy change. Simeon's decisive victory in this war cemented his authority and forced Byzantium to acknowledge Bulgarian military and political might. Simeon's primary ambition was to replace Byzantium as the preeminent power in southeastern Europe, a goal he articulated through his imperial title of Tsar and Autocrat of all Bulgarians and Romans. This audacious claim was not merely symbolic, it was supported by numerous military campaigns against Constantinople. His most notable achievements include the siege of the Byzantine capital and the crushing victory at the Battle of Anchialus in 917 AD, where the Bulgarian army inflicted a devastating defeat on the Byzantine forces, a massacre from which the empire struggled to recover for decades. These military successes extended Bulgaria's borders to their greatest historical extent, encompassing most of the Balkans and threatening Byzantium's very existence. Beyond his military pursuits, Simeon's reign fostered an unparalleled cultural and literary flowering that has been immortalized as the golden age of medieval Bulgarian culture. This era saw a deliberate and state-sponsored effort to create a body of scholarly and literary works in the newly standardized Old Church Slavonic language. The imperial court and the newly established literary schools at Preslav, the capital, and Ohrid became centers for the translation of Greek religious texts and the creation of original Bulgarian literature. The Preslav Literary School, under the patronage of Simeon himself, produced a wide array of works, including theological treatises, hagiographies, and historical chronicles. It also became a center for the development of art and architecture, with the construction of monumental palaces and churches adorned with intricate mosaics and frescoes. The Ohrid Literary School, led by Saint Clement, focused on the education of the clergy and the dissemination of the Old Church Slavonic liturgy throughout the provinces. This systematic effort ensured that the Bulgarian Church was staffed by a native, educated clergy, independent of Byzantine influence. The cultural flourishing of the Golden Age was a direct result of Simeon's political vision. By creating a distinct and sophisticated Bulgarian cultural identity, he sought to legitimize his imperial claims and distinguish his realm from the Byzantine cultural sphere. This period saw the production of some of the most important works of early Slavic literature and set the stage for Bulgaria's enduring role as a central hub of Slavic culture and orthodoxy. Simeon's dual focus on military expansion and cultural development established an empire that was not only politically formidable, but also a leading intellectual and religious force in the region. Tsar Simeon's military success was not merely a product of his ambition, but of a highly organized and disciplined fighting force. The Bulgarian army of the Golden Age was a formidable machine, distinguished by its unique blend of military traditions and advanced strategic doctrines. At its core, the army was composed of a professional standing force, supplemented by a system of feudal levies. The professional corps consisted of the elite heavy cavalry, the boyar retinue, and well-trained infantry. The feudal component was supplied by regional nobles, who were obligated to provide a certain number of armed men in times of war. This structure allowed Simeon to field large armies quickly, capable of both prolonged sieges and rapid, decisive campaigns. The composition of the army was critical to its tactical flexibility. The most devastating unit was the heavy cavalry, often clad in chainmail and armed with lances and bows. They were trained to execute coordinated charges that could break enemy lines. This was complemented by a mobile light cavalry, which served as scouts and harassers. The infantry, though less glamorous, was the backbone of the army, consisting of both spearmen and archers who provided a solid defensive shield and a barrage of missile fire. The Bulgarians were also proficient in the use of siege weaponry, which was essential for their numerous campaigns against fortified Byzantine cities and garrisons. The Bulgarian military doctrine under Simeon was highly evolved, often employing sophisticated maneuvers to outwit opponents. A favorite tactic was the feigned retreat, a maneuver perfected by nomadic peoples. The Bulgarian cavalry would launch a frontal assault, then suddenly turn and flee, luring the enemy into a pursuit. Once the enemy's formations were broken and disorganized, the Bulgarian force would pivot and deliver a devastating counterattack. This was used with crushing effect at the Battle of Anchialis in 917, where the Byzantine army was lured into a feigned retreat before being annihilated. This tactic demonstrated the army's high level of training and its ability to execute complex movements under pressure. Simeon's strategic thinking extended beyond the battlefield. He understood the importance of logistics and the psychological impact of his campaigns. His army was capable of moving quickly to strike deep into Byzantine territory, often targeting key administrative centers and monasteries to disrupt supply lines and demoralize the population. Unlike earlier, more opportunistic raids, Simeon's campaigns were part of a coherent strategy to weaken the Byzantine Empire from within. He sought not just to plunder, but to systematically dismantle their military and economic infrastructure, paving the way for his own imperial ambitions. The army's discipline and organizational capacity allowed it to sustain these long-term campaigns far from its own territory, which was a hallmark of its professionalism. Through a combination of superior organization, a versatile tactical approach, and a grand strategic vision, Simeon's army became one of the most feared and effective military forces of its time. The death of Tsar Simeon in 927 AD marked a critical inflection point for the First Bulgarian Empire, initiating a period of decline characterized by internal instability and renewed Byzantine assertiveness. Simeon's successor, his son Peter I, inherited a vast but overstretched empire and a legacy of constant warfare. Recognizing the need for a shift in policy, he concluded a peace treaty with the Byzantine Empire in the same year. This treaty was historically significant. It formally recognized the Bulgarian Patriarchal Church and the imperial title of its ruler, a major diplomatic victory. In exchange, Bulgaria renounced its claims to the Byzantine throne and ceded some territory. This agreement brought a period of relative calm, but it did little to address the systemic challenges brewing within the empire. While peace was established externally, it was a time of growing internal weakness. Peter's long reign was plagued by multiple rebellions from his own brothers and regional nobles, who contested his rule and sought greater autonomy. These internal conflicts sapped the central government's resources and authority, creating a politically fragmented landscape. Meanwhile, the Byzantine Empire, no longer facing the existential threat of Simeon, was in a period of resurgence. A new line of militarily competent emperors, beginning with Romanos II and accelerating under Nikephoros II, Phocas, systematically began to reclaim territories lost in the previous century. The balance of power was shifting decisively. The Bulgarian state was also subject to new external threats from the north. The Magyars, who had settled in the Carpathian Basin, began to conduct devastating raids into Bulgarian lands. Unlike the strategic campaigns against Byzantium, these were brutal incursions that disrupted the Bulgarian economy and further destabilized the state. In a desperate and strategically misguided move, Peter I invited the Kievan Rus led by Prince Sviatoslav to aid in repelling the Magyar attacks. Sviatoslav, however, proved to be an even more dangerous adversary. After defeating the Magyars, he turned on the Bulgarians themselves, capturing the capital of Preslav in 969 AD, and occupying a significant portion of the empire's eastern territories. This devastating invasion from the Rus presented a fatal opportunity for Byzantium. Emperor John IX Tzimiskes, recognizing the strategic vulnerability, launched a major military campaign against Sviatoslav. In a series of hard-fought battles, Tzimiskes drove the Rus forces out of the Balkans, but he did not return the conquered territories to the Bulgarians. Instead, he annexed them, formally ending the eastern part of the First Bulgarian Empire. Tsar Boris II, Peter's successor, was captured and brought to Constantinople, where he was forced to abdicate. This event marked the nominal end of the First Bulgarian Empire as an independent state, though a remnant of the ruling class continued resistance from the western regions. The decline was not a sudden collapse, but a gradual unraveling caused by internal strife, external pressures, and the strategic failure to adapt to a newly empowered Byzantine enemy. Following the Byzantine annexation of the eastern Bulgarian lands, a new center of resistance emerged in the western territories, led by the Kometopuli brothers. Of these, Samuel proved to be the most capable and ambitious. He consolidated control over the remaining Bulgarian territories, effectively creating a new power base with its capital initially at Prespa and later at Ohrid. By the late 10th century, he had not only restored a semblance of the Bulgarian state, but had also launched successful military campaigns against Byzantium, extending his control over parts of Greece, and even pushing south to the Peloponnese. His military prowess was recognized by his formal coronation as Tsar, which solidified his position as the legitimate heir to the Bulgarian throne. The rise of Samuel coincided with the ascent of a new, formidable Byzantine emperor, Basil II. Unlike his predecessors, Basil was a militarily gifted and strategically determined ruler who made the complete subjugation of Bulgaria the central objective of his reign. He embarked on a systematic and relentless campaign of attrition. Starting in the 982s, Basil II led yearly expeditions into Bulgarian lands. He focused on capturing key fortresses one by one and gradually wearing down the Bulgarian military through constant pressure and economic devastation. Samuel's strategy in response was primarily defensive, relying on a network of fortified strongholds and guerrilla tactics to exhaust the Byzantine army. He would avoid pitched battles when possible, using the mountainous terrain to his advantage to ambush Byzantine supply lines and raiding parties. The long and brutal war culminated in 1014 at the Battle of Clydon. Samuel, attempting to halt Basil's advance, constructed a large palisade in the Clydian Pass, a narrow valley in the Belesitsa Mountains. This defensive barrier was intended to trap the Byzantine army and expose it to Bulgarian archers and infantry. For weeks, Basil's forces were unable to breach the fortifications. However, the Byzantine general Nikephoros Ziphius, a veteran of many campaigns, discovered a secret path that allowed his forces to outflank the Bulgarian defences. In a decisive surprise attack, Ziphius's troops fell upon the Bulgarian army from the rear. The Bulgarians, caught completely off guard, were thrown into disarray and routed. The Bulgarian army was shattered in one of the most catastrophic defeats in its history. The aftermath of the battle was a testament to Basil II's brutality and his determination to end Bulgarian resistance permanently. He captured approximately 15,000 Bulgarian soldiers and, in an act that secured his grim nickname, ordered them blinded. For every 100 men, a single one-eyed soldier was left to guide the rest back to their Tsar. When Samuel saw his maimed army, the shock was so profound that it reportedly led to his death from a heart attack just a few weeks later. The loss of its leader and its main fighting force proved to be a fatal blow to the Bulgarian state. Although Samuel's successors attempted to continue the resistance, the empire was already in its death throes. Within 4 years, the Byzantines completed their conquest, and in 1018, the last vestiges of the First Bulgarian Empire were absorbed into the Byzantine Empire. Following the complete conquest of the First Bulgarian Empire in 1018, the Byzantine Empire established its direct rule over the Bulgarian lands for a period that would last nearly 2 centuries. The initial policy of Emperor Basil II was marked by a degree of pragmatism and leniency. He did not seek to destroy the Bulgarian nobility outright. Instead, he integrated them into the Byzantine administrative and military systems, granting them titles and positions of power in exchange for their loyalty. The local tax system was also initially maintained, preserving the existing structure of levies. This approach was intended to ease the transition and prevent immediate widespread rebellion by co-opting the existing elite and avoiding economic disruption. The administration was organized into several new themes or provinces, with military and civilian governors appointed by Constantinople. While the official language of governance and high culture was Greek, the Slavic language and local customs were not immediately suppressed. Crucially, the Bulgarian Orthodox Church was not completely dismantled. Although it lost its status as a patriarchate and was subordinated to the Patriarch of Constantinople, the Archbishopric of Ohrid was granted autocephaly. Its archbishop was a Bulgarian cleric, and the use of the Slavic liturgy was permitted. This compromise was a significant factor in preserving a sense of distinct Bulgarian identity during this period. The church became a focal point for cultural continuity and a reservoir of national sentiment, even under foreign rule. Despite Basil II's initial lenient policies, the Byzantine administration became more oppressive under his successors. The tax system was reformed, moving from payments in kind to more burdensome cash taxes. This shift placed a heavy strain on the peasantry and urban populations, as coinage was scarce. The increasing economic pressure, coupled with a growing perception of cultural subjugation, began to foment discontent. This led to a series of rebellions aimed at restoring the Bulgarian state. The most significant of these was the uprising of Peter Delian in 1040. Peter, who claimed to be a grandson of Tsar Samuil, successfully mobilized a large force and quickly captured Belgrade and the old capital of Preslav. He was initially successful and was crowned as Tsar, but the revolt was ultimately defeated by Byzantine forces, and Peter was captured. The resistance, while crushed, demonstrated the enduring desire for independence among the Bulgarian people. Another major uprising occurred in 1072, led by Georgi Voite. Like the Delian revolt, it had initial success, but was eventually suppressed by the Byzantines. These uprisings were not only military efforts, but also expressions of a deep-seated cultural and national resilience. The preservation of the Slavic language in religious texts and the continuation of folk traditions kept alive the memory of the independent Bulgarian kingdom. The Byzantine period, while a time of foreign domination, inadvertently hardened the resolve of the Bulgarian people, creating a collective identity forged in shared historical memory and opposition to imperial rule. This persistent undercurrent of resistance would eventually manifest in the rebellion that led to the establishment of the Second Bulgarian Empire. The 2-century period of Byzantine rule over the Bulgarian lands was brought to an end by the rebellion of the brothers Asen and Peter in 1185 amperes. D. The catalyst for this revolt was a new, extraordinary tax imposed by the Byzantine Emperor Isaac II Angelos. The emperor's decision to levy this tax to finance his wedding and military campaigns coincided with a time of severe economic hardship and growing resentment among the Bulgarian population. The two brothers, who were prominent landowners, chose this moment to lead an organized uprising from their stronghold in the mountainous region of the Stara Planina. They used a newly built church dedicated to Saint Demetrius of Thessaloniki in their capital of Tarnovo to legitimize their cause, declaring that the saint had abandoned the Byzantine capital and chosen Bulgaria to be his new home. This religious appeal rallied support from a broad cross-section of the population, including the peasantry and local nobility. The initial phase of the rebellion was marked by swift and decisive military action. Asen and Peter capitalized on the element of surprise and the internal disarray of the Byzantine Empire. They first secured control of the Balkan mountain passes and key fortresses, which provided them with a defensible base. Their forces then launched a series of raids into the Byzantine theme of Parastrion, successfully capturing several towns and territories. The Byzantine response was initially slow and ineffective. Emperor Isaac II led a campaign in the winter of 1185 to 1186, which met with limited success. The Bulgarian forces would retreat into the mountains, forcing the Byzantine army to pursue them through difficult terrain, where they were vulnerable to ambushes and logistical challenges. Asen and Peter's military strength was bolstered by an alliance with the Cumans, a nomadic Turkic people from the steppes north of the Danube. The Cuman cavalry proved to be a critical asset, providing the Bulgarian army with mobile and effective light cavalry, which the Byzantines found difficult to counter. This alliance allowed the Bulgarian forces to transition from defensive guerrilla warfare to more sustained offensive operations. In 1187, the Byzantines attempted another major counteroffensive, but it failed to achieve its objectives. A peace treaty was signed in 1187, which, while not a full recognition of the Bulgarian state, acknowledged its de facto independence and military power. However, hostilities resumed shortly thereafter, as the Byzantines refused to accept the loss of the territory. The political structure of the new Bulgarian state was solidified during this time. Peter was initially crowned as Tsar, symbolizing the continuation of the First Bulgarian Empire, but he soon ceded military command to his younger brother Asen, who proved to be the more dynamic and effective leader. This division of power allowed them to manage both the diplomatic and military aspects of the conflict. By 1190, after a Byzantine defeat in the mountains near the fortress of Lovech, Isaac II was forced to formally recognize the independence of the Second Bulgarian Empire. The rebellion had been transformed from a localized uprising into the successful re-establishment of a sovereign state. The new Bulgarian Empire, with its capital at Tarnovo, had secured its place on the map of the medieval Balkans, setting the stage for decades of conflict and expansion. Following the successful establishment of the Second Bulgarian Empire, the reign of Tsar Kaloyan began a complex period of military and diplomatic maneuvering. Kaloyan, who succeeded his brother Tsar Asen after his assassination in 1196, aimed to assert Bulgarian sovereignty and expand its influence. His early reign was marked by efforts to secure formal international recognition. He shrewdly leveraged the political division between the two major Christian centers, Rome and Constantinople. In 1204, Kaloyan entered into a union with the papacy, recognizing the Pope as the supreme head of the Church in exchange for a papal crown and recognition as king of the Bulgarians and Vlachs. This move was a tactical masterstroke, providing the Bulgarian ruler with legitimacy in the eyes of the Western European powers and a counterweight to Byzantine authority. The year 1204, however, marked a cataclysmic turning point in the geopolitical landscape of the Balkans. The Knights of the Fourth Crusade, diverted from their original goal of reaching the Holy Land, instead besieged and brutally sacked the Christian city of Constantinople. The fall of the Byzantine capital shattered the empire and led to the creation of the Latin Empire, a new Frankish state ruled by Western European nobles, with its capital in the newly conquered city. Baldwin I of Flanders was crowned the first Latin emperor. This new, aggressive Catholic power on the Bulgarian border posed a far greater and more immediate threat than the declining Byzantines. The Latin knights regarded Kaloyan and the Bulgarian state with contempt, dismissing his papal title and seeing his lands as ripe for conquest. Tensions quickly escalated. The new Latin Emperor Baldwin I and the Latin lords of Greece refused to acknowledge Bulgarian sovereignty, demanding submission. They began to exert pressure on the Byzantine Greeks who had remained in Thrace, prompting them to appeal to Kaloyan for assistance against their new rulers. Kaloyan, seeing an opportunity to both expand his influence and strike a blow against his powerful new rivals, responded to the call. He led his army into Thrace, where he was met with the enthusiastic support of the local Greek population. The decisive confrontation occurred on the 14th of April 1205 near the city of Adrianople. The Latin army, confident and underestimating the Bulgarian forces, marched out to meet Kaloyan in open battle. The Bulgarian Tsar employed a classic tactical deception. He used his Cuman cavalry to feign a retreat, luring the heavily armoured Latin knights into a pre-selected trap. The Crusader cavalry, eager to close in for the kill, broke formation and pursued the seemingly fleeing Cumans. This separated them from their infantry support and drew them into a marshy area that slowed their charge. At that moment, the Bulgarian main force, which had been hidden in reserve, attacked the disordered Latin ranks from the flanks. The Latin army was completely surrounded and annihilated. The Battle of Adrianople was a catastrophic defeat for the Latin Empire. Emperor Baldwin I was captured by the Bulgarians, an event that sent shockwaves throughout Europe. The victory solidified Kaloyan's reputation as a formidable military leader and cemented the Second Bulgarian Empire as a major power in the Balkans. It halted the initial expansion of the Latin Empire and provided the Greek resistance with the crucial time and space needed to organize and establish successor states, ultimately leading to the eventual restoration of the Byzantine Empire. The battle demonstrated that the Second Bulgarian Empire was not a mere successor to the first, but a powerful new entity capable of shaping the destiny of the entire region. Following the turbulent period after Tsar Kaloyan's reign, the Second Bulgarian Empire entered a new era of ascendancy under Tsar Ivan Asen II, who assumed power in 1218. His reign is widely considered the zenith of the Second Bulgarian Empire's power and influence. Ivan Asen II's initial years were focused on consolidating his authority and stabilizing the state after a series of dynastic disputes and short-lived rulers. His political acumen was evident in his diplomatic overtures, particularly towards the Latin Empire and the Greek successor states. He sought to secure his borders and position Bulgaria as a central power in the region's complex geopolitical landscape. This period of strategic diplomacy culminated in a series of military campaigns that would dramatically alter the map of the Balkans. The defining moment of his reign came with the Battle of Klokotnitsa in 1230. Ivan Asen II's forces decisively defeated the army of Theodore Komnenos Doukas, ruler of the Despotate of Epirus. Theodore had established a powerful state and was marching on Tarnovo with the intention of conquering Bulgaria. The Bulgarian victory was total, resulting in the capture of Theodore and most of his nobility. This single battle immediately expanded Bulgarian control, allowing Ivan Asen II to annex significant portions of Thrace, Macedonia, and Albania. The empire now stretched from the Black Sea to the Adriatic and Aegean seas, encompassing vast territories and solidifying its dominance over the Balkans. This territorial expansion, however, was managed through a pragmatic approach. Instead of a forceful occupation, Ivan Asen II often retained local administrators and rulers under his suzerainty, ensuring stability and preventing prolonged resistance. Beyond military conquests, Ivan Asen II's reign was a time of remarkable cultural and economic resurgence. The capital city of Tarnovo flourished as a major administrative, religious, and artistic center. The Tsar became a significant patron of the arts and architecture. Churches and monasteries were constructed and renovated throughout the empire, many of them featuring elaborate frescoes and intricate stone carvings that blended Byzantine traditions with unique Slavic artistic sensibilities. A key example is the Church of the 40 Martyrs, built in Tarnovo to commemorate the victory at Klokotnitsa. This architectural patronage, along with the burgeoning literacy and scholarly activity, marked the so-called Second Golden Age. Economically, the empire prospered from its strategic position, controlling key trade routes that connected Europe and Asia. Bulgarian merchants conducted extensive trade with both Byzantine and Italian city-states. This economic vitality, combined with the political stability and military success, created an environment of peace and prosperity unprecedented since the time of Simeon the Great. Ivan Asen II's reign showcased a leader who was not only a skilled military commander, but also a shrewd diplomat and an effective administrator. He re-established the Bulgarian Patriarchate, a move of immense political and spiritual significance, and through a combination of diplomatic alliances and military might, he secured the empire's position as a dominant force in southeastern Europe. The period under his rule remains a high watermark in medieval Bulgarian history, representing a powerful and flourishing state. The religious status of the Second Bulgarian Empire presented a unique political challenge upon its re-establishment. While Tsar Kaloyan had achieved the creation of the Bulgarian Church through a union with the Roman papacy in 1204, this relationship was primarily a tactical diplomatic maneuver, not a deep spiritual conviction among the Bulgarian clergy and populace, who remained fundamentally orthodox in tradition. Tsar Ivan Asen II inherited this delicate religious situation, recognizing that true political autonomy and spiritual legitimacy required the restoration of a fully independent Orthodox Patriarchate, rather than continued dependence on Rome. The initial diplomatic groundwork for this change was laid in the aftermath of the decisive Battle of Klokotnitsa in 1230. With the despotate of Epirus, the main Greek rival to the Byzantines in exile, eliminated as a serious threat, Ivan Asen II's military dominance was undeniable. This power provided him with the necessary leverage to approach the other major Greek successor state, the Empire of Nicaea, which held the legitimate claim to the Byzantine imperial and patriarchal titles. Both the Bulgarian and Nicaean leaders shared common enemies in the Latin Empire and the increasingly powerful forces of the Catholic West, creating a foundation for religious and political convergence. The formal negotiations began in earnest in the early 1232. The goal for both sides was clear. The Nicaean Emperor John III, Ducas Vatatzes, needed a powerful ally to finally retake Constantinople from the Latins, and Ivan Asen II needed the Greek Orthodox recognition for his church's highest rank. A major church council, attended by the Patriarch of Constantinople Germanus II, who resided in Nicaea, and representatives of the Bulgarian Church, convened at Lampsacus in 1235. The council resulted in a momentous agreement. The Pope's union was formally renounced, and the Bulgarian Orthodox Church was fully recognized as an autocephalous patriarchate. Io-Achim I, the Metropolitan of Tarnovo, was elevated to the rank of patriarch. This event was of immense political and spiritual significance. Politically, the establishment of the Patriarchate was the ultimate confirmation of Bulgarian sovereignty. In the Eastern Orthodox tradition, the recognition of an independent national church was intrinsically linked to the recognition of an independent state, led by a divinely sanctioned ruler. Ivan Asen II could now claim full equality with the Byzantine Emperor in Nicaea, both politically and religiously. This move decisively severed the remaining religious links to Rome, aligning the Bulgarian Empire firmly within the Orthodox sphere. The re-establishment solidified the spiritual and cultural identity of the Bulgarian people. The Patriarchate became the administrative and doctrinal center of the national church, fostering indigenous clergy, promoting literacy, and supporting the translation and creation of religious literature in Church Slavonic. This institutional independence provided a powerful unifying force across the vast, recently expanded territories of the empire, integrating the newly annexed Slavic and Greek populations under a single religious authority based in Tarnovo. The Second Bulgarian Patriarchate thus served not only as a spiritual institution, but as a central pillar of the Second Golden Age, underscoring Ivan Asen II's reign as the height of medieval Bulgarian power and cultural achievement. Following the territorial expansion and cultural blossoming under Tsar Ivan Asen II, the Second Bulgarian Empire was a major player in the intricate political arena of the Balkans. Its foreign policy was not one of simple aggression, but a complex series of diplomatic maneuvers and strategic alliances designed to secure its borders and maintain a balance of power. The empire found itself at the crossroads of several competing entities, primarily the fragmented remnants of the Byzantine Empire, the Latin Empire, and the burgeoning power of Serbia. Ivan Asen II skillfully navigated these relationships, demonstrating a profound understanding of geopolitical realities. The relationship with the Empire of Nicaea, the primary Byzantine successor state, was central to Bulgarian policy. Despite their historical rivalry, both shared a common enemy in the Latin Empire of Constantinople. This mutual threat created a pragmatic alliance, cemented by strategic marriages, which was crucial for their survival and expansion. This partnership was instrumental in the gradual erosion of Latin control over the Balkans. However, after the death of Ivan Asen II, this alliance became strained. The Bulgarian Tsars, fearing a restored, powerful Byzantine Empire, sometimes shifted their support, attempting to prevent any single power from becoming too dominant. This led to a period of shifting loyalties and occasional conflicts between the former allies. To the west, the growing kingdom of Serbia under the Nemanjić dynasty presented both a potential ally and a significant rival. The two states often cooperated against common foes, but their territorial ambitions in Macedonia and other disputed regions frequently brought them into direct conflict. Serbian kings, such as Stefan Dragutin and Stefan Uroš II Milutin, consistently pushed eastward, challenging Bulgarian authority. Bulgarian diplomacy with Serbia often involved matrimonial unions, but these were frequently broken or invalidated as political tides turned. The relationship was characterized by a delicate balance, where periods of fragile peace were punctuated by military engagements over strategic territories. The most profound and destabilizing external force, however, was the Mongol Golden Horde. Beginning in the mid-13th century, the Mongols swept through Eastern Europe, and the Bulgarian Empire lay directly in their path. The Mongol invasion was a cataclysmic event that could not be resisted through military might alone. Bulgarian rulers were forced to adopt a policy of submission and tribute, paying homage to the Mongol Khans to avoid utter destruction. This submission, while humiliating, was a practical strategy for survival. It drained the empire of resources and weakened its central authority, allowing regional magnates to assert more independence. The need to appease the Mongols significantly constrained Bulgarian foreign policy for decades, forcing them into a subordinate position and limiting their ability to engage in more ambitious campaigns against their Balkan rivals. This intricate web of diplomacy, alliances, and shifting rivalries defined the later centuries of the Second Bulgarian Empire. Its rulers had to constantly reassess their relationships, balancing the need for security against the ambitions of both traditional rivals and new, unpredictable forces. These shifting sands of Balkan politics were a direct cause of the empire's eventual decline, as its internal strength was slowly sapped by constant external pressures and the high cost of maintaining its position. In the mid-15th century, the geopolitical landscape of the Balkans was increasingly dominated by the military and political ascendancy of the Ottoman Empire. Christian European powers, facing the relentless Ottoman advance, recognized the urgent need for a coordinated military effort to halt their expansion. This collective anxiety culminated in the formation of a large-scale military campaign known as the Varna Crusade. Initiated and backed by Pope Eugene IV, the Crusade's primary military leaders were King Władysław III of Poland and Hungary, and the experienced Hungarian military commander John Hunyadi. The objective was to drive the Ottomans out of the Balkan Peninsula and provide a final opportunity for the remaining Christian states to liberate themselves from Turkish subjugation. The Crusader army was a coalition force comprised predominantly of Hungarian and Polish troops, augmented by contingents from Wallachia, Bohemia, and other European states. Their campaign began with initial successes as they marched through Ottoman-held territory, creating a sense of hope among the local populations. For the remaining Bulgarian resistance forces, this crusade represented a final desperate alliance. Though the last independent Bulgarian state had fallen, Bulgarian fighters from various regions joined the coalition, seeing it as their last chance for national liberation. Their participation in the campaign was a testament to the continued desire for independence and a final act of organized resistance. The two armies converged near the city of Varna on the Black Sea coast. On the 10th of November 1444, the decisive Battle of Varna took place. The Ottoman army, commanded by Sultan Murad II, significantly outnumbered the Crusader forces. The battle began with a fierce and protracted struggle for control of the flanks. Despite being numerically inferior, the Crusader army demonstrated initial tactical prowess. However, the turning point occurred when King Władysław III, demonstrating a heroic but ultimately fatal lack of strategic judgment, launched a rash cavalry charge directly at the Ottoman centre, where Sultan Murad II was positioned. The charge failed, and King Władysław was killed in the chaos. The death of their monarch shattered the morale of the Crusader army's core component. Their formation dissolved into a rout, and the remaining forces were unable to maintain their positions. The defeat was a catastrophic blow for the Christian world. It demonstrated the military superiority of the Ottoman forces and effectively eliminated the last significant coalition of European powers capable of a large-scale military offensive in the Balkans for decades to come. For the Bulgarian people, the Battle of Varna was a devastating finality. It extinguished any remaining hope for a Christian-led liberation and solidified centuries of Ottoman rule. This defeat cemented the Ottoman Empire's control over the Balkans and set the stage for the fall of Constantinople less than a decade later. The Varna Crusade, a final stand meant to liberate the region, instead became the decisive event that secured its subjugation. The social and political framework of the medieval Bulgarian Empire was a complex system that evolved from its early origins, blending the hierarchical structures of the Byzantine state with the communal traditions of the Slavs. At the apex of this society stood the Tsar, a figure who wielded absolute authority. The Tsar's power was not merely political. He was also the supreme military commander and, after the Christianization, the consecrated head of a divinely sanctioned state. While this position was hereditary, it was not immune to challenge, and the history of the empire is punctuated by succession crises and conflicts instigated by powerful members of the nobility. Immediately below the monarch were the boyars, the land-owning aristocracy. This class of high-ranking nobles was foundational to the feudal system. They held vast estates, which they controlled and administered, and commanded their own private retinues of soldiers. In exchange for their lands and status, the boyars owed fealty and military service to the Tsar. Their influence was significant, and they often served as key advisors, provincial governors, and military commanders. The power of the great boyar families could, at times, rival that of the Tsar, a dynamic that frequently led to internal strife and political fragmentation, particularly during periods of weak central authority. Parallel to the secular nobility was the powerful institution of the Bulgarian Orthodox Church. The senior clergy, including the patriarch, metropolitans, and bishops, constituted a powerful social and economic class. The church owned extensive lands and commanded considerable wealth. This gave them not only spiritual influence over the populace, but also a substantial role in political affairs. The clergy often acted as mediators and diplomats, and were key administrators in the Tsar's court. Their presence served as a unifying force, preserving a common cultural and religious identity across the diverse territories of the empire. The base of the social pyramid was the peasantry, who comprised the vast majority of the population. Their status varied, but most were bound to the land in a system of serfdom. They worked the estates of the Tsar, the boyars, and the church. Their obligations included agricultural labor, payment of taxes in kind or coin, and military service when called upon by their lords. Despite their lack of personal freedom and the economic burdens they carried, the peasantry's collective labor was the bedrock of the empire's agrarian economy sustaining both the elite and the military. This complex structure was the result of the gradual transformation of the early Slavic communal system. With the consolidation of state power, the old tribal-based social organization gave way to a more rigid, land-based hierarchy. Byzantine traditions, particularly in legal and administrative practices, were integrated into this new order. The result was a unique Bulgarian feudal society, distinct from Western European models, characterized by a powerful, centralized tsardom alongside a highly influential aristocracy and a formidable church. These intertwined forces defined the social fabric of the medieval Bulgarian state throughout its existence. The geographical position of the medieval Bulgarian Empire, nestled in the heart of the Balkan Peninsula, made it an essential crossroads for trade between Western Europe, the Byzantine world, and the vast markets of Asia Minor and the East. This strategic location was a source of significant economic power, as a network of ancient roads and rivers crisscrossed its territory. The Danube River to the north served as a major commercial artery, facilitating trade with Central European states and the Rus principalities, while overland routes connected the major cities of the empire to destinations like Constantinople, Thessaloniki, and the Adriatic coast. The empire's commercial activity was twofold. It served as a transit hub for goods from distant lands, and it was a producer and exporter of its own commodities. Among the most valuable transit goods were luxury items such as spices, silk, fine fabrics, and precious metals, which flowed from the east through Byzantine territories and into the Bulgarian lands on their way to European markets. The Bulgarian state benefited from this transit trade through customs, duties, and taxes, which filled the imperial treasury. Merchants from various nations, including Byzantine Greeks, Italians from city-states like Venice and Ragusa, and local Slavic traders, conducted their business in the empire's cities. The Bulgarian economy was primarily agrarian, but its commercial life was vibrant. Key exports included grain from the fertile plains, timber from its abundant forests, livestock, and a variety of crafts. Skilled Bulgarian artisans produced high-quality pottery, leather goods, and intricate metalwork that was sought after in neighboring regions. The trade in these local products contributed to the economic well-being of the peasantry and supported the growth of a local merchant class. Major cities became bustling centers of commerce and craftsmanship. Preslav, in the early years of the First Empire, and later Tarnovo, the capital of the Second Empire, were the epicenters of this economic activity. These cities were more than just political and religious centers. They were thriving markets where diverse goods were bought and sold. The presence of royal palaces, fortifications, and a large population of administrators, clergy, and soldiers created a stable domestic market that stimulated local production. The city of Tarnovo, with its formidable location, became a major commercial hub, attracting merchants and goods from across the region. This extensive trade network was a major driver of the empire's prosperity, particularly during its golden ages. The wealth generated from commerce allowed the Tsars to fund ambitious building projects, maintain a powerful military, and support the flourishing of art and literature. Trade was not just an economic activity, it was a cornerstone of the empire's power, influencing its foreign policy and cultural development as it connected the Bulgarian state to the wider world. In the 10th century, a new and powerful religious movement emerged in Bulgaria, posing a significant challenge to the authority of both the state and the newly established Orthodox Church. Known as the Bogomil heresy, it drew its theological foundation from dualistic Gnostic beliefs, a legacy of earlier Manichaean thought. The Bogomils believed in a radical dualism, positing that the world was governed by two opposing principles: a good, spiritual God responsible for all that is heavenly and invisible, and a malevolent, immaterial force, an evil demiurge, who created the tangible, corrupted, physical world. This core belief system had profound social and political implications. Central to the Bogomil doctrine was the rejection of all material institutions, They viewed the Orthodox Church as a construct of the evil creator, and as such, they disavowed its hierarchy, rituals, and sacraments. They considered church buildings and religious icons to be idols created by a false god. The Bogomils held their services in private homes and preached a simple ascetic lifestyle. Their rejection of the worldly order extended to the secular government as well. The state, its laws, and its taxes were also seen as products of the evil creator. Consequently, they preached disobedience to the Tsar and renounced military service, viewing all forms of violence as a sin. The Bogomil movement's tenets resonated deeply with the Bulgarian peasantry, who were subject to the oppressive feudal system. The Bogomils offered a spiritual explanation for their suffering, arguing that the social injustices and economic burdens were a direct result of the evil god's control over the material world. This provided a compelling alternative to the Orthodox Church, which was often viewed as a partner in the exploitation by the aristocracy. The Bogomils' message of simplicity and equality found fertile ground among the common people who had little stake in the existing social structure. This ideological appeal made the movement a potent force for social discontent and a direct threat to the established order. The Tsar and the Orthodox Church responded with severe persecution. Tsar Peter I and, later, Tsar Samuel, alongside the church leadership, considered the Bogomils to be not only heretics, but also dangerous political subversives. The movement's pacifism and rejection of state authority were seen as an existential threat to the stability of the empire. Persecution included imprisonment, forced conversions, and, in some cases, execution. Despite these repressive measures, the Bogomil heresy proved difficult to eradicate. Its secretive nature and its deep roots among the peasantry allowed it to survive and even spread. From Bulgaria, the heresy diffused across the Byzantine Empire, reaching as far as Italy and France, where it influenced later movements like the Cathars. The Bogomil heresy thus stands as a testament to the complex interplay of religious belief, social rebellion, and political power in the medieval Balkans. The mid-13th century saw a new and devastating power sweep into Eastern Europe, fundamentally altering the political landscape of the Balkans. This force was the Mongol Golden Horde, a formidable military machine that extended its influence westward from the vast Eurasian steppes. The Mongol campaigns were characterized by their strategic mobility, overwhelming numbers, and a disciplined military structure that was unparalleled in its efficiency. Their expansion into the region in the 1242 and subsequent incursions were a cataclysmic event that brought an abrupt end to the Second Bulgarian Empire's period of political dominance. The initial Mongol raids of 1241 were exploratory, but their destructive power quickly became apparent. The Bulgarian Tsar Ivan Asen II had recently died, and the empire was already weakened by a succession crisis. The Mongol forces, under the command of Kadan and Batu Khan, passed through Bulgarian territory, causing widespread destruction and demonstrating their military superiority. The empire's defences, while strong against regional rivals, were unprepared for the scale and tactics of the Mongol cavalry. The Bulgarians attempted to form a coalition with other powers, but the sheer speed and ferocity of the Mongol advance made organised resistance nearly impossible. This initial devastation was followed by further punitive expeditions, forcing the Bulgarian Tsars into a position of vassalage. Tsar Constantine III, ruling after the initial invasions, was compelled to recognize the suzerainty of the Golden Horde. This new relationship was formalized through the payment of tribute. The Bulgarian state, once a major regional power, was now reduced to a tributary state, required to send annual payments and provide military support to its new overlords. The acceptance of this status was a direct result of military pressure, and the recognition that continued resistance would only lead to further destruction and loss of life. The political consequences within Bulgaria were profound. The Tsardom's central authority was severely compromised, as the Mongols often intervened in dynastic disputes and supported rival claimants to the throne who were more pliable to their demands. This external pressure exacerbated internal political fragmentation. Powerful boyars, seeing the Tsar's weakness, began to assert greater regional autonomy, in some cases even striking their own deals with the Mongols to protect their estates. The Mongols' presence thus acted as a catalyst for the decentralization of power, a process that would continue to plague the empire in its final centuries. Economically, the impact was severe. The constant tribute payments drained the treasury, and the destructive raids decimated agricultural regions, leading to food shortages and social unrest. Many people fled the more exposed northern territories, seeking refuge in the more defensible mountainous regions. The disruption of established trade routes, once a source of great wealth, further crippled the state's finances. The Mongol invasion did not cause the immediate collapse of the Second Bulgarian Empire, but it initiated a long-term decline from which it never fully recovered. The invasions left the state militarily and financially exhausted, creating a geopolitical vacuum that would later be filled by the rising power of the Ottoman Turks. The era following the zenith of the Second Bulgarian Empire was defined by a gradual and irreversible internal decline. The central authority of the Tsar began to erode, giving way to political fragmentation that weakened the state from within. The primary catalyst for this decay was the rise of the boyars, the powerful provincial aristocrats. These nobles, who controlled vast estates and military retinues, increasingly acted as independent rulers in their own territories, undermining the authority of the throne in Tarnovo. Their loyalty to the central government was often conditional, based on personal gain and a desire for greater autonomy. This shift from a centralized monarchy to a collection of quasi-independent feudal domains was a fundamental structural change that fractured the empire. This decentralization was exacerbated by frequent dynastic struggles and succession crises. The lack of a stable line of succession led to periods of political chaos, during which different factions of the nobility supported rival claimants to the throne. These civil wars drained the state's resources, exhausted its military strength, and created deep-seated divisions that were exploited by external rivals. The constant turnover of rulers meant that no single Tsar was in power long enough to implement long-term reforms or successfully consolidate power over the rebellious boyars. This internal strife created a vicious cycle. A weak Tsar could not control the nobles, and the rebellious nobles prevented the rise of a strong, unifying leader. The weakening of the central government had profound military and economic consequences. The imperial army, once a formidable force under strong rulers, became fragmented as boyars refused to contribute their levies or used their forces to fight against the Tsar or other nobles. This made the empire increasingly vulnerable to attacks from its neighbors, particularly the expanding Serbian and Byzantine powers. The political fragmentation also severely disrupted the internal economy. With local lords levying their own tolls and taxes, the flow of goods and commerce was hindered. The central treasury, deprived of consistent revenue from its provinces, lacked the funds to maintain a professional army, fortify border regions, or manage a large-scale administration. The Church, which had previously been a unifying force, also experienced its own internal power struggles that mirrored the political turmoil of the state. These conflicts within the highest echelons of the clergy further contributed to the sense of a fragmented and weakening state. The public, observing the instability and conflict among both the secular and spiritual authorities, lost confidence in the institutions that were meant to provide order and stability. The internal decay was not a sudden collapse, but a slow, agonizing process. Each successive crisis, whether a dynastic struggle or a rebellion by a provincial lord, chipped away at the empire's cohesion and strength. By the mid-14th century, the Second Bulgarian Empire was no longer a unified political entity, but a collection of loosely associated feudal territories, a state ripe for conquest by a unified and disciplined external force. In its formative centuries, the Bulgarian Orthodox Church served as a cornerstone of state power and national identity. Its establishment under Prince Boris I provided a unified spiritual foundation for the new empire, and its independence, later solidified by Tsar Ivan Azan II, was a testament to the empire's political standing. However, As the secular authority began to wane in the 14th century, the Church's internal stability and its relationship with the state also deteriorated. Its fragmentation directly mirrored the political decline that was fracturing the empire itself. The primary challenge came from the growing power of the boyars, the provincial lords who saw the Church as another tool for asserting their regional authority. These powerful aristocrats began to exert influence over local bishoprics, controlling appointments and using ecclesiastical lands for their own economic benefit. This politicization of the Church hierarchy undermined the Patriarch's central authority and turned spiritual offices into instruments of feudal power. The high-ranking clergy, instead of providing moral and spiritual guidance, often became embroiled in the very same dynastic and political intrigues that were tearing the empire apart. This internal strife within the Church's leadership weakened its ability to act as a cohesive national institution. The Church's increasing entanglement in secular affairs led to a decline in its spiritual prestige and a loss of public trust. The opulence and political maneuvering of the clergy stood in stark contrast to the asceticism of earlier spiritual leaders. This perceived moral decay created a vacuum that was filled by popular, often dualistic, religious movements. While earlier heresies like Bogomilism had been a problem, the weakened state and a spiritually compromised church now lacked the tools and moral authority to effectively counter such challenges. This religious dissent further sowed division among the populace and challenged the foundations of the Orthodox state. Economically, the Church's vast landholdings and exemption from taxes made it a powerful economic entity, but this wealth also contributed to the fragmentation. Wealthy monasteries, once centers of learning and spiritual refuge, increasingly functioned as autonomous feudal domains. They accumulated land, peasants, and military retinues, often acting outside the direct control of the Tsar. This concentration of wealth in ecclesiastical hands, while the central treasury suffered, contributed to the overall economic decay and the inability of the Tsar to fund a strong, centralized army or administration. Ultimately, the Church ceased to be a unifying force. It became a fragmented institution, with its various factions and wealthy monasteries aligned with competing boyars or pursuing their own political agendas. It could not provide a strong, singular voice to rally the people against external threats, or to address the internal decay. This institutional decline was not just a symptom of the empire's downfall, but a contributing factor, as a fractured spiritual and moral authority could no longer hold a fragmented political state together. The Second Bulgarian Empire's period of political resurgence under Tsar Ivan Azan II was accompanied by a remarkable cultural and artistic flourishing centered in the capital city of Tarnovo. This era marked a high point in medieval Bulgarian art and architecture, characterized by a distinct style that synthesized Byzantine artistic traditions with local Bulgarian innovations. The city itself became a testament to this creative energy, with a magnificent display of monumental construction that projected the empire's power and prosperity. The primary architectural focus was the fortified complex on Tsarovets Hill. This citadel was not merely a military stronghold, but a symbol of imperial authority, housing the royal palace and the patriarchal cathedral. The construction techniques of the time are notable for their use of cloisonné masonry, where intricate patterns of red brick and white stone were interwoven to create visually stunning exteriors. This decorative brickwork was also prominent in the numerous churches built across the city and its surrounding regions, adding a unique, regional aesthetic to the Byzantine-inspired structures. Inside these churches and monasteries, a vibrant school of fresco painting emerged. Bulgarian artists, while trained in the iconographic rules of Byzantine art, developed a more expressive and realistic style. The frescoes of the Church of the Holy 40 Martyrs in Tarnovo and the Bojana Church, though outside the capital, are prime examples of this new approach. These murals are celebrated for their expressive faces, individualized portraits of donors and saints, and a departure from the strict, stylized forms of earlier art. The artists' use of vivid colors and a greater sense of dynamism brought a new life to religious narratives and figures. In addition to architecture and frescoes, the arts extended to other mediums. Icon painting continued to be a significant practice, with Bulgarian masters producing works that were deeply spiritual, yet stylistically distinct. These works often utilized intricate gold leaf backgrounds and a refined sense of detail. Illuminated manuscripts were another hallmark of this golden age. Scribes and artists in the Tarnovo literary school produced beautifully illustrated Gospels and Chronicles, which not only preserved religious and historical texts, but also served as a canvas for a rich visual culture. The artistry in these manuscripts reflects a high degree of skill and patronage, showcasing detailed miniatures and elaborate initial letters. This cultural renaissance was not a spontaneous development, but was actively sponsored by the court and the church. Tsar Ivan Asen II used art and architecture as a tool of statecraft, commissioning magnificent projects to legitimize his rule and demonstrate the empire's wealth and spiritual authority to both his subjects and foreign rivals. The artistic legacy of Tarnovo thus represents a culmination of medieval Bulgarian identity, where political and spiritual power were inextricably linked to a flourishing and unique artistic expression. The decline of the Bulgarian Empire coincided with the rise of a new and formidable power to the south, the Ottoman state. Originating as a small principality in northwestern Anatolia, the Ottomans systematically expanded their territory through a combination of military discipline, strategic alliances, and effective administration. Unlike the fragmented feudal kingdoms of the Balkans, the Ottoman state possessed a centralized government and a highly professionalized military machine, making it a cohesive and unstoppable force. The backbone of this military was a unique force known as the Janissaries, an elite infantry corps. These soldiers were recruited through the Devshirme system, a levy of Christian boys from conquered territories who were converted to Islam and trained from a young age to be loyal to the Sultan alone. This provided a standing army of highly disciplined, well-equipped, and motivated soldiers with no feudal ties. Alongside them were the Sipahis, the cavalry, who were granted land in exchange for military service, ensuring a constant supply of armored horsemen for campaigns. This military structure was fundamentally different from the feudal levies of the Balkan states, which were often unreliable and plagued by local loyalties. The Ottoman expansion into Europe began in the mid-14th century. After seizing a foothold in Gallipoli, they embarked on a methodical campaign of conquest. Their strategy was not to immediately annex large swathes of territory, but to first defeat the major military powers, securing key fortresses and strategic passes. They often used a combination of siege warfare and direct battle, adapting their tactics to the specific defences of each region. The Battle of Maritsa in 1371 was a particularly devastating blow, where a large coalition of Serbian and other Balkan forces was decisively routed. This victory effectively shattered the last organized resistance to the Ottoman advance and left the fragmented states, including Bulgaria, isolated and vulnerable. As the Ottomans advanced, they did not immediately eliminate local rule. Instead, they often imposed a system of vassalage on conquered principalities, allowing local rulers to remain in power in exchange for tribute and military support. This policy, while seemingly lenient, was a means of controlling the territory without the cost of direct occupation and administration. These vassals were then used in subsequent Ottoman campaigns, turning former enemies into instruments of further conquest. The lack of a unified, sustained response from the Christian kingdoms of Europe was a critical factor in the Ottoman success. The states of the Balkans were too consumed by their own rivalries and internal strife to form a lasting alliance against the common threat. For the Bulgarian Tsardom, the Ottoman arrival was an existential threat. Its political fragmentation had left it unable to mount a cohesive defense. The last remaining territories of the empire were encircled and systematically reduced. The Ottomans' military and political strategy, which prioritized discipline, central authority, and the methodical elimination of resistance, was perfectly suited to exploit the weaknesses of the fragmented Bulgarian state. It was not a clash of equals, but a final systematic campaign of subjugation that would bring an end to the medieval Bulgarian state. In 1393, the Ottoman Empire, under the command of Grand Vizier Shandali Ali Pasha, launched a decisive campaign to conquer the remaining Bulgarian territories. Their primary objective was Tarnovo, the fortified capital of the Second Bulgarian Empire. The city, situated on three hills Saravets, Trapezitsa, and Svetogora, was a formidable defensive position, protected by the Yantra River and a system of strong walls and citadels. It served as both the political and spiritual heart of the state, and its fall would effectively end any hope of organized Bulgarian resistance. The siege began with the encirclement of the capital. The Bulgarian defenders, commanded by Patriarch Euthemius, prepared for a prolonged and desperate defense. Tsar Ivan Shishman had retreated to Nikopol to organize forces, leaving the city's defense to the Patriarch. The Ottoman military, well versed in siege warfare, employed a combination of overwhelming force and systematic tactics. They used their superior artillery to bombard the city's walls, weakening the fortifications and creating breaches for their infantry. This use of heavy cannons was a critical element of Ottoman siegecraft, a technology that many of the Balkan feudal states were unable to match. For 3 months, the defenders of Tarnovo mounted a fierce and determined resistance. They repelled multiple Ottoman assaults and inflicted heavy casualties on the besieging army. The Bulgarian troops and armed citizens used the natural terrain to their advantage, leveraging the steep hills and narrow passes to slow the Ottoman advance. However, their numbers were finite and their resources were dwindling. The city's supply lines had been cut, and the defenders faced starvation and exhaustion. The heroic stand, though costly for the Ottomans, was ultimately unsustainable in the face of a larger, better supplied enemy. On the 17th of July 1393, a critical breach was made in the city's defences. The Ottoman forces, following a concentrated artillery bombardment, launched a massive final assault. The Bulgarian defenders, though depleted, fought to the last, engaging in brutal hand-to-hand combat within the city's streets. Despite the valiant efforts of Patriarch Euthemius and the citizens, the city's fortifications were overrun. The central citadel on Saravets Hill, with its imperial palace and patriarchal cathedral, was the last to fall. Following the conquest, the city suffered widespread destruction. The Patriarchate was dismantled, and Patriarch Euthemius was exiled, symbolizing the end of the Bulgarian Orthodox Church's independence. Many of the city's churches and monasteries were converted into mosques, and a significant portion of the population was displaced. The fall of Tarnovo was not merely a military defeat. It was a psychological and political subjugation that marked the end of an era. With the heart of the empire captured, the remaining Bulgarian territories, isolated and devoid of their cultural and spiritual center, had little chance of withstanding the continued Ottoman pressure. Following the fall of Tarnovo in 1393, the Vidin Tsardom stood as the last remnant of independent Bulgarian statehood. Ruled by Tsar Ivan Sratsimir, a son of Tsar Ivan Alexander, this kingdom had maintained a fragile autonomy by strategically aligning itself with the Kingdom of Hungary. Its existence was a testament to the political fragmentation that had long plagued the Second Bulgarian Empire. Yet it also represented a final, isolated bastion of resistance against the encroaching Ottoman power. The situation of the Vidin Tsardom was precarious. It was a small state, geographically confined by the Carpathian Mountains to the north and the Danube River to the south, and politically isolated from its former Bulgarian territories now under direct Ottoman control. Ivan Sratsimir's decision to pledge nominal allegiance to Hungary, a major rival of the Ottoman Sultanate, was a calculated risk. It provided some protection from direct Ottoman assault, but it also made the Tsardom a geopolitical pawn in a larger conflict. This alignment placed it in direct opposition to the rising Ottoman Sultan, Bayezid I. The catalyst for Vidin's final fall was the Crusade of Nikopol in 1396. This was a large-scale European military expedition, primarily composed of Hungarian, French, and Wallachian forces, aimed at halting the Ottoman advance into the Balkans. The Crusaders, led by King Sigismund of Hungary, intended to confront the Ottomans at the key fortress of Nikopol, which had been previously captured. Tsar Ivan Sratsimir allowed the Crusader army to pass through his territory, an act that solidified his position against the Ottomans. This was the final straw for Bayezid I, who saw Vidin as an obstacle to his complete dominance over the region. The defeat of the Crusaders at the Battle of Nikopol was catastrophic. The Ottoman army, disciplined and well commanded, inflicted a decisive defeat on the Christian coalition. The loss shattered any remaining hope of a large-scale European military intervention to save the Balkan states. With the Crusader threat neutralized, Bayezid I immediately turned his attention to the Vidin Tsardom. He marched his army to the city of Vidin, which was now completely exposed and without allies. Unlike the prolonged siege of Tarnovo, the fall of Vidin was swift. The city's fortifications, while substantial, were no match for the full might of the Ottoman army under Bayezid I. The siege was brief, and the city capitulated. Ivan Sratsimir was captured and exiled to Anatolia, effectively ending the ruling dynasty. His small kingdom was annexed and incorporated directly into the Ottoman Empire, marking the end of all independent Bulgarian statehood in the medieval period. The year 1396, therefore, represents a final and definitive conclusion to the saga of the medieval Bulgarian Empire, as the last remaining vestige of its political and cultural autonomy was extinguished.